I spent 7 years watching solo passengers over 60 make the same expensive mistakes over and over again. One woman paid nearly $2,000 extra just because she didn't know one simple booking trick. Another spent an entire week eating alone in her cabin because she was too nervous to ask one question. Today, I'm sharing 10 mistakes I saw every single week that cost solo cruisers money, safety, and the fun they deserve. If you're cruising solo or thinking about it, hit that subscribe button right now. I share insider secrets like this every week that can save you thousands. Let's start with the biggest money mistake solo travelers make, and it's one most people don't even realize they're paying: the single supplement fee. When you book a cruise cabin as one person, cruise lines charge you anywhere from 50 to 100% more than the per-person rate couples pay. That means if a cabin costs $1,000 per person for two people, you might pay $1,500 or even $2,000 as a solo traveler for the exact same space. I watched solo passengers hand over massive amounts of extra money because they didn't know there were ways around this. Some cruise lines offer dedicated solo cabins with no supplement. Others have specific sailings where they waive or reduce the fee. And certain last-minute deals knock the supplement down to almost nothing. One solo traveler I met booked a last-minute Alaska cruise and paid just $200 more than the per-person couple rate instead of the usual $1,000 penalty. She told me she almost didn't go because the original quote was so high. But one phone call to the cruise line changed everything. Here's what to do. Before you book, call the cruise line directly and ask about solo cabin options or reduced supplement sailings. Check sites that specialize in solo travel deals. And consider repositioning cruises or off-season dates where cruise lines are desperate to fill cabins and willing to cut you a deal. Don't just accept the first price you see online. I've seen passengers save over $1,000 simply by asking the right questions. And if you're flexible with your dates and destinations, you'll find even better deals. The cruise lines would rather fill a cabin at a discount than leave it empty. Now let's talk about cabin location, because this matters more when you're traveling alone. I saw solo passengers book the cheapest inside cabin at the very front of the ship, or way up on deck 12, and they regretted it almost immediately. If you're alone and your cabin is in a remote part of the ship, you're going to feel isolated. Long walks down empty corridors late at night can feel unsafe. And if you're on a high deck far from elevators, it's exhausting, especially if you have mobility issues or get tired easily. One woman in her late 60s told me she booked a cabin on deck 11 at the very front because it was cheap. Every time she wanted to go to dinner or a show, it took her 15 minutes just to get there. By day 3, she was skipping evening activities because she was too tired to make the trek. She spent most of the cruise in her cabin watching TV, which defeated the whole purpose of taking a vacation. Pick a cabin on a mid-level deck, close to an elevator and near the main activity areas. You'll feel more connected to the ship. You'll see people coming and going. And if you need help or feel uncertain about something, you're close to high-traffic areas where crew and passengers are always around. It's worth paying a little more for location when you're solo. The extra $100 or $200 can make the difference between feeling isolated and feeling part of the cruise community. Here's a mistake that ruins the social experience for so many solo cruisers: not requesting a table assignment in the main dining room. A lot of solo travelers assume they'll be stuck eating alone or that they're bothering people by asking to join a group. So they either skip the main dining room entirely and eat at the buffet alone every night, or they request a table for one and spend the whole cruise isolated. I watched this happen constantly. One solo traveler ate every single meal in her cabin because she didn't want to face the dining room alone. She missed out on one of the best parts of cruising: meeting people over dinner. By the end of the week, she told me she felt lonelier than she had in years. It broke my heart because it was completely avoidable. When you book your cruise, call and request to be seated at a larger table with other passengers. Most cruise lines are happy to do this. You'll meet couples, families, other solo travelers, and it takes all the pressure off. You don't have to initiate conversation. Just show up and the group dynamic does the rest. I saw solo cruisers who requested shared tables end up making friends they stayed in touch with for years. And if you don't click with your table mates after the first night, you can always ask to be moved. The dining staff are used to these requests. Don't isolate yourself out of fear or awkwardness. The main dining room is where friendships start on a cruise. Let's talk about shore excursions. Because solo travel adds a safety layer most people don't think about. I saw solo passengers book independent excursions in ports they didn't know, wander off alone into unfamiliar areas, and run into trouble. One woman in her 60s took a taxi by herself to a beach in Jamaica and got dropped in the wrong location. She had no phone service, no way to contact anyone, and spent 2 hours trying to find her way back to the port. She barely made it before the ship left. She was shaken and stressed for the rest of the cruise. Another solo traveler joined a small tour group that turned out to be unreliable. The guide abandoned them halfway through, and she had to navigate back to the ship on her own in a country where she didn't speak the language. She made it back, but she told me she'd never felt so vulnerable in her life. If you're cruising solo, book ship-sponsored excursions or stick with major tour companies that have a solid reputation. Yes, they cost more, but you're guaranteed to get back to the ship on time, and you're with a group the entire time. The peace of mind is worth the extra money. If you want to explore independently, do it in ports that are walkable and safe, and always tell someone on the ship where you're going. Write down the ship's name and dock location. Carry a card with that information in your pocket. I'm not saying you can't be adventurous. I'm saying don't take unnecessary risks when there's no one watching your back. If something goes wrong and you miss the ship, you're on your own to catch up at the next port, and that can cost thousands of dollars. Here's something most solo cruisers don't anticipate: tender boats. If your ship is too large to dock and you have to take a small boat to shore, getting on and off can be tricky when you're alone. The boats rock, the steps are steep. You're carrying a bag, maybe a camera, and there's no one to steady you or help you balance. I saw solo passengers, especially those over 60 with mobility concerns, struggle every single time we tendered. One man slipped getting off a tender in the Caribbean and twisted his ankle badly. He spent the rest of the cruise on crutches because he didn't have anyone to help him navigate the transfer. He couldn't go on any more excursions. He could barely walk around the ship. His whole vacation was ruined by one misstep. If a port requires tendering and you're not confident in your balance, consider skipping that stop or booking an excursion that includes tender assistance. Some excursions have staff who help passengers on and off the boats. And don't be afraid to ask crew members for help. We're trained to assist. There's no shame in saying you need a hand. In fact, we'd rather help you than watch you struggle and risk injury. Crew members are stationed at every tender transfer, specifically to assist passengers who need it. Now let's talk about evenings and late nights, because this is where solo travelers feel the most vulnerable. I watched solo passengers stay in their cabins after dark because they felt unsafe walking around the ship alone. One woman told me she wanted to see the evening show, but didn't feel comfortable walking back to her cabin by herself at 10 or 11 at night. So she missed nearly every nighttime activity. She stayed in her cabin, watched movies, and went to bed early. The truth is, cruise ships are generally very safe, but I understand the concern, especially if you're in a remote cabin or you're not used to being alone in unfamiliar environments. That anxiety is real, even if the risk is low. Stick to well-lit, high-traffic areas at night. If you're nervous walking back to your cabin, ask a crew member to walk with you, or wait until there are other passengers heading in the same direction. Most ships also have security officers who patrol the corridors. And honestly, I never saw a serious safety incident involving a solo passenger on any of the ships I worked. But your peace of mind matters. Don't let fear keep you from enjoying your cruise. If you feel unsafe, speak up. The crew would rather escort you to your cabin than have you miss out on the fun. Here's a mistake that surprised me because it's so avoidable: solo travelers not participating in organized social activities. Most ships have meet and greets for solo cruisers, group fitness classes, trivia games, dance lessons, cooking demos, all designed to help people connect. But I saw solo passengers skip these events because they felt awkward showing up alone. One solo traveler told me she spent the entire week by the pool with a book because she didn't think she'd fit in at group activities. By the last day, she was visibly lonely and regretted not trying. She said she wished she'd pushed herself out of her comfort zone on day one instead of waiting until it was too late. Push yourself to attend at least 1 or 2 organized activities in the first couple days. It's easier to meet people when there's a structured reason to talk. Trivia teams need members. Dance lessons pair people up. Cooking demos have group tastings. You don't have to become best friends with everyone, but even casual conversations make the cruise feel less isolating. And you might be surprised how many other solo travelers are in the same boat, hoping someone will talk to them first. I saw solo passengers bond over a trivia game and end up spending the rest of the cruise together. It starts with showing up. Let's talk about choosing the right cruise line and ship, because not all of them are solo-friendly. Some lines cater heavily to families with kids. Others focus on couples and honeymooners. If you book the wrong ship, you're going to feel out of place the entire time. I worked on ships where solo passengers told me they felt like the odd one out, because every activity and promotion was geared toward couples. One solo traveler said she went to dinner one night, and the waiter automatically brought her a table for 2 with romantic lighting. It was awkward and uncomfortable. Another told me she skipped the Valentine's-themed party because she felt like she didn't belong. Do your research before you book. Some lines, like Cunard, Norwegian, and Holland America, are known for being solo-friendly. They offer solo cabins, host solo traveler meetups, and have a higher percentage of single passengers. Smaller ships also tend to be better for solo cruisers because the social environment is more intimate. You'll see the same faces every day, and it's easier to strike up conversations. Avoid megaships with 10 dining rooms and 15 bars, unless you're very outgoing. You'll get lost in the crowd. Read reviews from other solo travelers. Check online forums. The right ship makes all the difference. Here's a planning mistake that affects your whole experience. Not balancing port days and sea days based on your solo comfort level. Some solo cruisers love port days because they can explore and stay busy. Others feel anxious going ashore alone and prefer sea days where they can relax on the ship. I met solo travelers who booked cruises with a port every single day and felt exhausted and overwhelmed. They didn't have time to rest or enjoy the ship. I also met solo cruisers who booked itineraries with too many sea days and felt bored and isolated by day 4. Without the distraction of ports, they felt the loneliness more acutely. Think honestly about what kind of experience you want. If you're extroverted and love exploring, pick an itinerary with lots of ports. If you prefer a slower pace and want time to read, relax, and maybe meet people on the ship, choose a cruise with more sea days. There's no right answer. It just has to match your personality and energy level. And remember, you can always skip a port if you're tired. You're in control of your schedule. Finally, here's the mistake that might sound small but makes a huge difference. Not using apps or online groups to connect with other solo cruisers before the cruise even starts. There are Facebook groups, cruise critic forums, and apps where solo travelers going on the same sailing meet up, plan dinners together, share excursions, and coordinate activities. I saw solo passengers who used these tools show up on embarkation day already knowing 5 or 6 people. They had dinner plans. They had excursion buddies. They felt instantly connected. Meanwhile, solo travelers who didn't use these resources spent the first few days feeling isolated and trying to figure out how to break into conversations. One solo cruiser told me she wished she'd known about these groups before she sailed. She said it would have changed her entire experience. Before you sail, search for your specific cruise on Facebook or cruise forums. Join the group. Introduce yourself. You don't have to commit to spending the whole week with anyone, but having even 1 or 2 familiar faces when you board makes a world of difference. Some groups even organize pre-cruise meetups in the embarkation city. It's an easy way to start building connections before you even step on the ship. So there you have it. 10 mistakes that cost solo cruisers money, safety, and the experience they deserve. Don't pay the full supplement. Pick a connected cabin. Request shared dining. Book safe excursions. Be careful with tenders. Stay in well-lit areas at night. Join activities. Choose solo-friendly lines. Balance port and sea days. Connect with others before you sail. Cruising solo after 60 can be incredible when you go in prepared. Like and subscribe for more insider tips.